Good evening. This is your Lutheran Saints in Ministry evening devotional for August the 16th. I am Pastor Craig Fourman from Abiding Christ Lutheran Church. The reading is tonight from Romans chapter 13, starting at the first verse, where St. Paul writes, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed. And those who resist will incur judgment, for rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. He too is the servant of God, the avenger, who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's anger, but also for the sake of one's conscience. Because of this, you pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. So pay to all what is owed to them: taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, and honor to whom honor is owed." Did you ever think that you would hear a text in the Bible that encouraged you to pay your taxes? I knew it made my mother proud when I paid them on time, but for the love of God, who'd have thought that? You know, I remember as a young pastor, one of my older colleagues once pulled me aside one day after a Tuesday Bible study over at Wittenberg and said to me, "Craig, I'm really concerned about you. You're such an angry young man. I'm afraid you're going to lose it someday." Now, I knew his heart was in the right place. I was, as is my habit in that moment, forcefully and passionately expressing an opinion on a matter for which I had a strong view. You know how I can be sometimes. And if you don't, now you do. Anyway, I thanked him for his concern. I told him not to worry. I didn't go home and kick the dog. I didn't take it out on my wife or my children. In fact, I was channeling all of my energy in that moment into what was become for me my life mission. Above all else, that angry young man wanted someday to grow up and become an angry old man. I don't mean to brag, but mission accomplished. There's way too much anger floating around these days. We have become a people unreasonably angry about way too many things. And much of this unreasonable anger, I think, stems from unreasonable expectations. Somehow we've got in our head that Christianity is about the right to be and to do exactly what we want, what pleases us, that we should be beholden to no one, and we should never place ourselves under any authority whatsoever. That's not exactly the picture that the Bible paints. And whenever this so-called right is infringed, whoa, man, do we get really, really angry. Look, I know that Americans are not a people accustomed to or willing to submit themselves to any authority. I get that. I can't think of a more unpopular word in this independent-minded America in which we live than the word submit. But that word has a basic Christian understanding. It's a category, if you will. It's central to this teaching about our willingness to place ourselves in submission to earthly authorities. In situation after situation, we see the Bible teach the same thing. That's submission. In the Greek, that word is hupotasso. That means literally to place yourself under the authority. That submission can and often is the godly thing to do. We're called to place ourselves under authority, whether it's a government, because after all, if you don't submit yourself to the government, then how can you say that you're a constitutional supporter? It's a constitutional government. How, for example, can you be a pastor if you don't submit yourself to the authority of a bishop or a congregation or a council? How can you not submit yourself to the authority of a pastor who has spiritual authority, or to a spouse under the love that mutual submission calls for? You do this all for the sake of the greater good, the common good, the good of others. Now, there's an important caveat, of course, to all this, because there's also stories in the Bible about how we should not submit ourselves to earthly authorities when they are trying us to disobey his word or to not live according to his will. But that's not the same as being unwilling to submit ourselves to any authorities for any reason. It's important for Christians, especially for we American Christians in these angry times, to remember Jesus did not call his church to be revolutionaries. He did not call us to defy authority. He did not even call us to speak the truth to power. That's not the core of who we are. Christians are called to submit to Christ, to all kinds of authorities, not because they deserve it. Many of them don't. We can offer suggestions. We can question authority if what they are doing is not what's best for us and for our neighbors. We can even ask them to reconsider. But in the end, as Paul asserts, you either believe that God is at work in the world, making things work, and submit to Christ by submitting to earthly authorities, or you don't believe it. And each of those bears a witness to the rest of the world about what we think about our God. We're not talking about blind obedience. Authority that asks us to disobey God or do something contrary to his word is not worthy of our submission. But just to be angry because somebody's in a position of authority, well, that's just childish. So let's get this straight. Our Christian witness to the world must be that God is not a Republican or a Democrat, not an independent, not a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter, not a believer in democracy or in socialism. He's not trying to earn your vote or seek your consensus or solicit your opinion. God is a king. You either trust him or you don't. And he desires your love, your commitment, your obedience, and your submission. And that always begins in the moment, not sometime in the indeterminate future. So let me say this clearly. One angry old man to a whole bunch of other angry old men and women. Take the anger out of your hearts. Maybe take the signs out of your yards. And let Paul speak these words to you. Be respectful. Pay taxes to whom taxes are owed. Revenue to whom revenue is owed. Respect to whom respect is owed. Honor to whom honor is owed. Hear it. Remember it. And I don't write this stuff, but I do preach it.